She wrapped her baby in rags beside the trail, never imagining that the next pair of footsteps would change both their lives forever. And as the wind howled across the barren plains of the frontier, Elena pressed her trembling lips to her infant's forehead, whispering apologies she could barely breathe, because no mother ever wants to abandon her child. Yet desperation is a cruel puppeteer pulling strings she never consented to. For 3 days she had wandered without food, without a safe place, her worn boots torn open, and every step felt like wading through grief. And though her baby, tiny Mateo, whimpered with hunger, her own body had nothing left to give, no milk to soothe him, no shelter to keep him warm, until finally she collapsed beside a weather-beaten trail used only by wandering traders and distant tribes, hoping, praying, that someone kinder than fate would find him, because she believed she wouldn't survive the night. But just as she laid him down and whispered, "Forgive me, my Silo," the sound of hooves cracked through the air like thunder from the heavens, and she froze, thinking perhaps bandits or soldiers had found her. But instead, through the rolling dust, emerged a lone warrior on a chestnut stallion, tall and broad-shouldered, with a woven cloak that marked him as a defender of the Lakota plains, his long hair tied back, his sharp gaze the kind that could read a soul in seconds. And as he dismounted, bow in hand, he noticed first the bundle of rags, and then the hollow-eyed woman slumped behind it. Instinct told her to run, but she couldn't even lift herself. And when he knelt to uncover the baby, the warrior inhaled sharply, for Mateo opened his round, terrified eyes and reached up with a trembling hand, as though begging the stranger to be gentler than the world had been so far. The warrior's name was Keem, a man feared for his strength in battle, but known to his people for a heart that refused to let innocence be swallowed by cruelty. And in that moment something inside him cracked open, something he had buried years ago when he lost his own wife and unborn son to a fever that swept their village. He remembered the night he buried them beneath the whispering pines, remembered swearing he would never again allow himself to feel the ache of fatherhood or the terror of losing it. But now, looking at the fragile child wrapped in rags at his feet, he felt a warmth he thought had died inside him, and when he lifted his eyes to the mother with cracked lips and exhausted resignation, he saw in her the reflection of a pain he had known all too well. "Why is your child on the ground and not in your arms?" he asked, his voice deep but not unkind, and Elena, defeated, whispered, "Because my arms won't last till morning." She told him everything, how war had burned her village, how her husband had been taken as a prisoner, how she had fled with only her baby and the clothes on her back, how hunger and cold had scraped her down to nothing, and instead of judgment, Keem offered his hand, telling her, "No child of plains will die while I still have breath." Lifting both mother and child onto his horse, he rode hard through the night toward his tribe's wintering grounds, his powerful arms steady around her trembling frame. And though she tried to stay awake, exhaustion devoured her, so she slept against his chest, trusting a stranger more than she had trusted anyone in months. When she awoke, she was inside a warm lodge, her baby nestled beside her on a soft buffalo hide, and Keem's younger sister, Akane, was stirring herbal broth over a fire, her gentle smile easing Elena's fear. Over the next days the tribe nursed her back to life, feeding her, wrapping her in furs, teaching her how to breathe without dread, while Keem took Mateo everywhere he went, carrying him during patrol rides, letting him grip his braids, whispering soft stories of the sky spirits. And slowly, Elena realized that her baby smiled more in that week than he ever had before. Word of her arrival spread quickly, and though some elders questioned sheltering an outsider, Keem stood before them and declared, "A mother who tries to save her child is no outsider. She is kin by spirit." His authority silenced any doubts. As winter deepened, Elena found herself watching Keem more than she intended, watching how he rebuilt damaged arrows, how he soothed frightened animals, how he listened more than he spoke. And though she reminded herself not to hope, Hope trickled in anyway, quiet but persistent. Meanwhile, Keem, who had sworn never to feel again, found his gaze drifting toward her as she braided her hair, as she laughed softly with Akane, as she held Mateo with the tenderness of a woman reborn from ashes. One evening, while snowflakes drifted like feathers outside, Keem approached her with a fur-lined cloak he had crafted himself, telling her it was time to choose whether she wished to stay with the tribe permanently or leave when the war quieted. Her heart pounded. She confessed she feared being a burden, feared her past returning to haunt the tribe, feared losing the fragile peace she had found, and Keem, with eyes that carried both storm and sunlight, replied, "Nothing born of courage is a burden, and your past is not what defines you. It is what you survived." As she fought tears, Mateo reached for Keem, babbling in delight, and the warrior, who had once vowed never to hold another child, lifted him with a smile that melted every wall around his heart. Their bond deepened with each shared sunrise, each quiet evening by the fire, each moment when their hands brushed as they passed Mateo between them, until one night when Elena found Keem outside, staring at the stars, gripping the necklace that had belonged to his late wife. She apologized for intruding, but he shook his head, confessing that losing his family had carved a wound he thought would never heal, until he saw her on the trail. "You and your son reminded me that love does not replace what was lost," he whispered, "but it can grow beside the pain, like grass after a fire." Tears slipped down her cheeks as she told him he had saved not only their bodies but her spirit. He stepped closer, brushing her tears with calloused fingers, and though he hesitated, she rose onto her toes and pressed her lips to his. Just a soft, trembling kiss that felt like choosing life again. By spring, Elena had begun training in the tribe's daily routines, learning to stitch hides, grind herbs, and ride with better balance, while Keem taught her the language of the plains, the stories of his ancestors, the meaning of each sunrise. When finally news came that the war had ended and survivors from her village had been found, she faced the hardest decision: return to what remained of her old life or embrace the new one flourishing around her. She walked to Keem, hands shaking, and whispered, "I don't know where I belong." And he answered, "Wherever you choose to plant your heart, that place will become home." That night she stayed awake, imagining both futures, one where she rebuilt what was shattered, another where she built something entirely new. In the morning, as Keem prepared his horse, she approached with Mateo in her arms and said, voice steady, "My heart chose long ago, when you lifted my son from the ground." Keem didn't speak. Instead, he pulled them both into his arms, holding them like a man who had wandered through grief and finally found solid earth again. The tribe welcomed her officially in a circle of blessings, Mateo giggling as Keem placed a small leather charm around his tiny neck. And so the woman who once believed she would die alone on a cold trail found a family, a warrior's unbreakable love, and a future woven not from fear but from mercy, because sometimes the world takes everything from you, only so you can discover where you truly belong.